Chapter 4. Stepping outside casually dressed in pants, a silk shirt and leather jacket, she felt the cool breeze of fall. A raindrop hit her face, reminding her that the season was changing, and after the rain, the cold would settle in like an unwelcome visitor. The driver stood at the door and opened it when he saw Alex walk close. He smiled and he said to her, "Mrs. Blackstone?" "Yes. Thank you." And she entered into the dark limo, and the driver closed the passenger door and slid in under the wheel, and the car with Alex slipped into the Saturday night traffic in the middle of a crowd of taxis tooting their horns. Alex watched out the dark window as the shops slipped by. Dress shops, Starbucks, department stores, and the endless signs with their lit-up marquees, flashing the latest advertisement and news. The limo cruised by couples in a cab, on their way to dinner or dancing, straining to see if they could see anyone important in the limo. She could see them, but they couldn't see her behind the dark windows. She thought of taking a drink from the well-stocked bar, but thought against it. Drinking had gotten her in trouble before, especially since she wasn't much of a drinker. Alex wasn't as relaxed as she had been. It was being in New York that made her tense. In Montana, she knew she didn't have to think about Robert anymore, or Miranda. That was over, and she trusted Brandon and Jonas that the young woman's body would stay hidden. She didn't want to know the gory details, and she never asked. It was all Jonas's fault. As handsome and rich as he was a nut, Alex thought. A kind-hearted, always getting in trouble nut, and as much as she loved him, she felt relieved not to have to deal with him anymore. When she looked up, the car was pulling into a driveway surrounded by hedges and tall trees. A large black iron gate stopped the car. The gate opened, and the driver drove in and up to the front door. There, a gable roof extended the length of the limo, covering and protecting the passengers from bad weather. Alex waited for him to open her door. She had been cautioned by Max many times to let the drivers do their jobs. But Alex hadn't been born with drivers to take her around. When she lived in Brooklyn, and where she went to college, she took the subway. Before her door could open, Melody ran out to greet her and opened the door. "Alex, I can't believe you came. My parents will be thrilled to see you, however, they are absent tonight." Alex glanced curiously at Melody and said, "At their own party? Come in." Melody took Alex's hand and pulled her to the door, and they walked into the mansion with Melody holding her hand. "Wow, this is eccentric," Alex said, looking around the house at the eclectic furnishings. On one wall, heads of dead animals. An elk, a zebra, a lion, and it went on and on. Alex turned her head and saw two ivory tusks, belonging obviously to a dead elephant. "It is kind of unusual. More like a museum for dead things, but that's another story. Remind me to show you around," Melody said. Holding Alex's hand, she directed her to the stairs. Alex stood at the bottom, looking up. "Yeah, there's a lot to take in here, but my father swears by these stairs. He says they will keep him young and extend his life." "I hope not." Melody shot Alex a wide, innocent grin. Alex knew Melody was harmless, and she would say anything to affect someone. Alex gave Melody a hard look and a raised eyebrow. "Oh, don't be alarmed. I'm not trying to get rid of my father. Time will take care of that. I think he has about 5 good years. They had me late." Melody shrugged. "Oh, that explains everything," Alex said, walking up the winding stairs that appeared to never end. She knew Melody was kind of strange or quirky, but she appeared harmless, and they had bonded when she took a class with her and learned that Robert was their visiting professor. Alex dropped the class when she discovered his objectives, and Robert's objectives centered on her. That's my mother's room, and that's my father's room. Strange, isn't it? Not really, Alex said, thinking about the 2 apartments they maintained as she and Max's living arrangement. And never seeing him sometimes for weeks and months. But he promised her that that was over. He would be there when she and the children needed him. She needed him tonight. I bet you couldn't imagine sleeping in different beds with that handsome hunk. He looks like he needs sex every night. I can tell. I can read men. Learned that from my mother. Remind me to tell you about that too, Melody said, smiling at Alex. Alex didn't want to think about that, because she wasn't sleeping with Max every night, and she didn't want to think that anyone else could either. Melody bounced over to the 3rd door and opened the door to her room. It was full of stuffed animals, and every doll Alex had wanted when she was a child was on her bed or propped up in every corner and cabinet in her room. She turned to Alex and said, "I don't stay here. I have an apartment in the village. Since I'm hosting this party tonight for my mother's friends and their spoiled children, moi not included," she said, placing a manicured hand to her chest, "and a few oddball friends of the rich fucked up people who think life isn't worth living, unless there's a Halloween party or any kind of party. I'm trying to make the best of a fucked up situation." She glanced around, seeing what Alex is seeing. "I hope I don't have to sleep in here tonight," Alex said. "Well, anyway," she said, pulling a cautious Alex into the room. "You would think my parents and their friends would have grown out of that childish Halloween party shit, and leave that to us younger people. I should be hosting my own party, but I have to do this favor for my mother." She gave out a long sigh, as if she had been working all day. Plopping down on the bed, Melody looked around her room, and she reached and tossed the stuffed animals on the floor. Then she patted the bed for Alex to sit near her. Alex followed suit. She reached for the stuffed dog left on the pillow, passing her hand over its head, and sat. Then she remembered her little dog. She has to get back to her children and dog. They all would be lost without her. The dog thinks she's his mother. Alex is pulled from her thoughts by Melody's never-ending chatter. "Only because my mother makes me feel guilty. Her every discussion is about how she gave birth to me, and she swears it was a hard birth. That's her way of getting me to do things I don't want to do. I let her think she's affecting me, but I couldn't give a damn. I just love my mother, that's why I agreed to do this, and I want to fuck one of my mother's friend's son." Melody raised her eyebrow. "I know he's gay, but what the hell? He's fucking hot. If he wants me to use one of those, what's it called?" She's snapping her finger trying to find the name. "Dildo." Melody's eyes brighten. "Yes, that's it. I knew you would know. He looks like the type that wants a big black one shoved up." "I get the picture, Melody." Alex closed her eyes. Inhaled and exhaled. Melody smiled, stood, and walked to the closet and pulled out a rack of 10 costumes, one after another, tossing them on the bed. Then picking up one, placing it up against her chest while staring into the floor-length mirror. "What do you think?" She held a dark costume of Maleficent with a long black dress past her ankles, including the black headdress with horns. "Looks good, don't you think?" Melody smiled expressively, leaning her head to the right and then the left. "Yeah, on Angelina Jolie pit. But not you." Melody frowned because she had her heart set on that costume. Alex watched at her face, and she could tell she was disappointed with that statement. "You need something red. Something hot. Something that would make that man want to throw you on this bed and fuck you beyond recognition, foobar," Alex said, laughing. Her eyes lighting up, then her mouth turning into a slight embarrassed closed smile. Her mouth weak and trembling when she said the word fuck. I like where your head is. Then Melody reached for a short skirt, to a Red Riding Hood costume with a cape. It even has a basket for my sex toys, Melody said, laughing. She caught sight of Alex fidgeting, and then a smile crossed her face. That settles it. Red Riding Hood it is. And for you, she said, pulling out a Catwoman costume. Alex stood, and Melody placed it against her. It was black and shiny with tights, and then Melody bent and pulled out ankle-high boots from the closet. Try them on. You look like you wear my size. And Alex did wear her shoe size. Size 6.5. Perfect, she said as Alex pulled them up. And guess what? Melody said. She looked at Melody confused. It comes with a whip. If any of those friends of my mother gets too friendly, you can pull out your whip. You do know how to use one. Was that a statement or question? She wasn't quite sure. After being married to Max, and with his peculiarities with sexual explorations, she had become quite a specialist with the whip. And it was like anything else in life. After years of Max's extreme sexual preferences, it became an acquired taste, where she enjoyed using the whip and riding crop on him. Now that settles it. We're going out there with our sexy selves, and I will seduce a gay man, and you will whip some men tonight. That is if it is all right with your handsome husband. She viewed Alex with a watchful eye. Alex didn't respond, because she had been reminded of how she met Robert, and flogged him. Well, what Mr. Blackstone doesn't know won't hurt him. Right, Alex? There was silence in the room. Fairly unusual for Melody, but it wouldn't be quiet long. I was shocked when I realized you were married to the notorious Millennium Blackstone. After meeting you at school, no one would believe it. They still can't believe it, so I don't tell them, Alex said, examining the costume to keep from meeting Melody's eyes. Would you like something to eat before the crowd pours through the door? Nothing, she thought a second, maybe a glass of wine. To calm your nerves. I get like that when I have to meet new people. You can't tell by talking to me, but I'm shy. Having a drink, and putting myself out there is a way I overcome it. My therapist said that's a great way to get through things I dread doing, Melody said. Just do it. And she raised both hands. I know what you mean, I see a therapist too. Max and I see a sexual therapist. I can see where you would, after being married to Blackstone. Melody began rambling on again. You know, before I met you, all my mother and her friends talked about was Millennium Blackstone. I feel like I know him. What did they say? Something about being notorious around New York, because of his fondness for bondage and S&M. I don't know anything about it, and I doubt that my mother and her friends knows, but it makes for good gossip. They knew when he would date women. And because she knew what he liked, they knew the women he dated had to be heavy into that sort of thing. Did your mother's friends say any more? Alex asked. Only when this began, and when the dating and gossip stopped. The gossip stopped about 3 years ago. That was when they married. And then it started up again when he showed up with a Eurasian girl at his side. It was in the papers, Melody said, glancing at Alex's expressions. It was the same paper Alex saw with Max and the girl. They said that Robert, the now deceased Robert, that pervert, was vying for her attention. I hope you know that your husband and Robert were the biggest and richest S&M and bondage men in New York. They would pay a queen's ransom for a specialty like sexual asphyxiation. And your husband appeared to be the winner. Alex became unnerved by the conversation. She didn't want to know any more. She had forgiven him, and he had forgiven her. They were together not because they had children, although that was one reason, but because they complemented each other sexually, and they would die without each other. But Alex couldn't stop questioning things. Did he kill Robert because of her, or because Robert stole his mistress? The thought sickened Alex. Looking at Melody, she said, "Order a bottle of red wine." "Now you're talking my language." Melody got on the intercom and called down to the steward. He answered, "Yes, miss." "Go to the cellar and bring me a bottle of red wine." She paused. "I know. Is my mother and father here?" She paused to hear from the steward. "Then do as I say if you want to keep your job." She hit a button and turned to Alex. "Just because they were here when I was born and practically raised me, they think that gives them the right to question me." She shrugged. "It does give them some rights, but not when it comes to my parents' money. I'm the only child, and I'll drink a bottle of expensive wine if I want. They can give the cheap stuff to the crowd of freeloaders. Well, that's my mother's expression for users." Looking away and anxious for the wine, Alex said, "What time does the party start?" 11 o'clock. "Earlier, but that's when we make our entrance. Everyone wears a mask, and you can do whatever you want, and no one will know. My mother hired some entertainment, besides the rock band. If they think we'll have that waltz music, they are mistaken. I guess after a few rounds of head-splitting music, my mother's crowd will voluntarily go home and let us young people party." Chapter 5. A knock came to the door, and a young woman walked in with a black pantsuit and white shirt, carrying a small tray with 2 large sparkling crystal goblets and a bottle of wine. She opened the fancy bottle with the French label, and poured a small amount for Melody to try. "Great." And the woman put the tray on a white table, and exited the room. Alex turned to Melody. "How is it?" "How the fuck should I know? I've never had a taste of a $5,000 bottle of wine in my life. Tastes the same to me." She held the bottle up, looking at the label. "It could cost more, but what good is it if you can't drink the wine?" She smiled and poured Alex a full glass. Alex placed the glass to her lips, as if she thought it would turn her to gold. "Oh yes, this is good. Max said I should take more interest in this kind of thing, what with all his money. I mean, our money. Max buys wine only to sell and make more money. I want to drink it," she said, giggling, and toasting to Melody with their glasses hitting together, making a ping sound. The glasses made a fine ringing sound like good crystal, and it probably was because she couldn't imagine otherwise. "And so do I. What's the use of having money if you can't spend it, or wine if you don't drink it?" Melody said, drinking all of the wine in her glass, and reaching for the bottle, pouring out more for her and Alex. "Tonight is going to be the best night of our lives. Promise me you'll try to make it that way, because every time I've seen you, you look so sad. How can a young woman with a rich, gorgeous, handsome man like yours look so unhappy?" She didn't answer Melody because she didn't realize the things that weighed on her. She had just wanted to get out of New York. Sign the papers, sell all of the stuff Max had accumulated, and put everything behind her and start anew. It was agreed he would keep only a few of his holdings: the Millennium Hotel in San Francisco, and one casino in Las Vegas. The rest to go on the block. Especially his holdings in Asia. That had to go. It was those casinos and hotels that kept him away from his family. 11 o'clock drew near, and Alex and Melody had drunk over $50,000 of wine, with 2 bottles laying in the basket near her bed. She raised her empty glass. That last bottle was one my father had been saving. He wanted to drink it for Christmas with his snooty friends. Oops, my bad, she said, giggling. I'm not drunk yet, Alex confided. That's because you've been drinking the good stuff. Just wait until you get a glass of that cheap wine. You'll be falling on your ass, Melody said, laughing and almost tumbling on the floor. I hope you don't have any reporters here, Alex said, her head bobbing to the side. She may have thought the wine had little effect on her, but it did affect her perception and judgment. No press. They were barred from the last party. Melody stood and fell back on the bed near Alex. She turned to Alex and said, "It seems someone took a picture of me sucking off one of my mother's girlfriend's husband. They had the nerve to plaster that all over the front pages of some little Long Island village newspaper. How did they get away with that? Don't they have a morality code?" "I guess they did, because they put a black square over his cock and left my face and mouth in the picture. They only showed him waist down, his zipper opened." "But how did anyone recognize him?" Alex inquired. "His suspenders were hanging down on the side, and he had his initials on them. And someone remembered his tux. At our fundraiser for some children's orphanage, he was bragging about how he kept his body in shape. He took off his jacket, and everyone saw his initials. He put his fingers in the suspenders and plucked them when he said he wore the same suit when he married his wife, and his body was still the same. Nobody has the same body when they are 20 and 45. I didn't see his body at 20, but from what I saw of him, men in their 20s can't get that hard or look that good." Melody made a gesture and picked up a bottle and banged it on the foot of the bed. "Wow," Alex said. "That hard." And they almost fell off the bed laughing. Returning to the story, Melody said, "Thank God it was only in a small-town newspaper. My mother paid dearly for those negatives, and to keep them from putting it on the internet. I keep them in the safe. I have to remember to burn them one day. Can't have the grandchildren getting hold of that." She winked at Alex. Melody pointed to the safe setting in her closet. "Do you want to see the pictures?" she said, raising her eyebrows up and down. "I don't think I want to see a picture of you with a man's dick in your mouth," Alex said, slurring her words. "That's what my father said when my mother tried to show him the pictures and blame him for spoiling me." Alex stared at her. She couldn't smile. Melody, seeing a slight disapproval on Alex's face, said, "Not to worry. His wife died years before. He hadn't had an orgasm in 5 years. And he was sexy as hell with his mingle gray hair. He kept that body of his in shape. You should have seen the muscles on him. Almost as hard as that husband of yours." A broad smile came over Melody's face, but Alex's mouth turned down at the corners on the mention of Max. It was nice that Melody appreciated a good-looking guy, but hands off when it came to Max. Sometimes you have to give nature a little push. It's called priming the pump. To this day he credits me with saving his life. And he gave me the best orgasm I've ever had. He really knows how to go down on a woman." And Melody sighed and looked away with a smile. "Well, Melody, I think this is getting a little too personal, and you should make your appearance." Alex stood near Melody, and Alex turned her around. Melody is dressed in her Red Riding Hood costume and looking more like a she-wolf, instead of an innocent girl out for a stroll in the forest. "I can't wait to introduce you to my mother's gossipy old friends. When I say this is Mrs. Maximilian Blackstone, they are going to wet their depends." Grabbing Melody's hand before she opened the door, Alex said, "No, you're not. I don't want anyone to know that I'm married to Max. Oh right. I think I'm kind of drunk. Melody wrinkled her nose. The wine just hit me. Melody tottered out of the room, walking as if on eggshells with Alex following behind her. I need your arm, Melody said. Where are we going? The elevator is to your right, Melody said, pointing. And you had me walk up all those stairs? Stairs are for sober young people, and the elevator is for the elderly and drunk. When they reached the elevator in a matter of seconds, it was opening with no one on it. Then they walked out of the elevator, into a wall of music, and noise of people talking and moving around. No one noticed them, until Melody bumped into a man in his 60s. He was dressed in black in a Batman's costume with a cape and a mask. It's about time you came down. Who's your friend? No one you would know. And the drunken middle-aged man circled Alex. I like that costume. He stood in front of her, in his Batman costume. Hey Catgirl, want to use that whip on me, he shouted. I think we can get something going. Alex glanced at him, smiled, pulled out the whip hanging on her side, and popped it on the floor, making a loud crack near his feet. The man leaned back and turned and scurried off to freshen his drink. I guess he wasn't drunk enough, Melody said, laughing. You sure as hell know how to handle that thing, and men. She glanced at Alex, and slanted her head and gave her an approving smile. Then Alex caught sight of a well-positioned fireplace against the wall, and she observed a young man in his 30s leaning on it and staring at her. He was tall, about 6'3", with a ruggedly handsome face from what she could see. He wore a black mask over it, his shoulders wide and not diminished by the black cape. Who's he? Alex whispered. You mean the tall, interesting man standing alone, watching and evaluating everyone? The one in the Star Wars The Force Awakens, Kylo Ren costume? He's the night's entertainment. He does look interesting in those black boots, and dressed all in black. I get hot just looking at him. Look, he even has a laser. It seems he can't take his eyes off you, Alex. It's something about him. I don't know what it is. Maybe it's his eyes that remind me of someone, Alex said. You can see his eyes. Girl, you aren't drunk enough. He's coming over here, Alex whispered. Don't leave me. Alex reached for Melody's arm, but she pulled away. Melody walked past her, leaned back and whispered, You're going to thank me. Then Melody turned away and smiled. The dark-haired handsome man smiled and nodded at Melody. Alex furrowed her brow. Nervous. She still didn't know how to react to men when she wasn't with Max. She didn't like small talk, especially if she had been drinking. She didn't trust herself around handsome, good-looking guys. And she didn't trust them because of Robert. She made a promise to herself to stay away from them. She had all she wanted in life. Who could give her more, and who was as handsome as Max? Only Robert could have compared to Max in looks and money. But after what had occurred with Robert and with those kind of men who she could be sexually attracted to, she would make it a point to go the other way. Alex turned to walk the other way, but she wasn't quick enough, and the crowded room with men and women standing around laughing, talking, and drinking prevented her escape. Searching the room for cameras, she imagined Max would know if she found someone desirable. It was all in her mind. And there was no way for him to know she was at Melody's home, and at a party, and looking into a stranger's eyes. When she left the apartment, the only other person knew she had gone was the doorman, and he was away from his desk. Taking a deep breath and trying to relax, she reasoned that there was nothing wrong with having a casual conversation with a guest. How else was she to learn how to interact with others and stop being awkward with wealthy people? After all, she was now one of them, Max tried to convince her. She wasn't sociable with Robert, and yet he followed her. It was like that with rich, powerful men. Once they see something they like, they overstep their bounds. She would get this out of the way quick. She would tell him she's married, and that should do it. He stood in front of her staring, taking her all in and saying nothing. "I'm married," she blurted out. "I would be surprised if you weren't. Someone as young and beautiful as you would have a man somewhere." He extended his hand. Alex looked down at it as if it was a snake ready to bite her, but after an awkward moment, she placed her hand in his and he shook her hand. "My name is Ross, and you're Mrs. Blackstone." "How did you know? Did Melody tell you?" Alex said, looking around for Melody, to warn her about going against her wishes. "I don't know Melody, and she doesn't know me. I think I saw you in a newspaper once. You and your husband." Alex remembered she hadn't put on her mask. She fidgeted for it, but couldn't find it. Alex glanced up at him, waiting for him to speak. "I was invited to perform at this party. I don't turn down money, even though I don't need it. I enjoy what I do. In about 15 minutes, I will go into that room." Ross pointed to a large room. The doors were opened, and Alex could see a small stage surrounded by tables and chairs. "It's great meeting you, Mrs. Blackstone. I think Mr. Blackstone is a lucky man." Ross stared long. Then he bent and kissed Alex's hand. Alex angled her head to the side, and her mouth fell open in surprise. She smiled a closed smile. She was sobering up, and for some reason she had enjoyed that brief talk with Ross. And that's all it would be. All she needed was just brief conversations with a man who found her appealing. She needed it for her ego. Nothing complicated where she would compromise her marriage. She wouldn't make another mistake again. Especially since Jonas Blackstone wasn't around to interfere in her life. And she didn't want to be reminded of how he had almost wrecked her life and marriage. Alex waited a moment until the guest had found seats. Her thought was to sit at the back and enjoy the show. She hung around and stood near the double doors. "Oh, there you are." It was Melody. "You're not going to sit back here." She grabbed Alex's hand and passed her through a maze of tables with guest clapping. The entire room looked like either Disney World or a freak show with all the different costumes from Snow White to Sleeping Beauty. Tables full with Batman and Robin, Cinderella and their prince, Beauty and the Beast, and then Little Red Riding Hood and Catwoman prancing through the crowd to sit up front. The curtains opened, and out came the magician. He introduced himself as just Ross. He performed card tricks and tricks with coins, nothing complicated, something simple. The entire room was drunk, and they would clap and be amazed at anything. But he amazed and got their attention when he disappeared. Alex was even impressed at that feat. And she clapped louder than most and stood up. When everyone searched around for him, he was standing in the doorway behind them. Someone pointed and said, "There he is." Everyone turned, and he jogged through the audience and took Alex's hand to her surprise, and led her to the stage with her looking back at Melody, who appeared to enjoy the joke. "My next trick isn't a trick after all. I'm going to hypnotize this beautiful woman. And when she wakes, she won't know that she had been hypnotized. She will be unaware of my suggestions and won't know anything. Her voice may sound different, and her personality may change." "I don't think I can do this," Alex said, looking in Ross's eyes. "I'm afraid." Ross was holding both her hands facing her. "Do you have any deep dark secrets?" No, Alex said. She lied. Then you don't have anything to worry about. Don't worry, I won't ask you anything personal, and I won't ask you to do anything you haven't done before. It will be innocent fun, and you can bring a little laughter to everyone here. And who knows, it might not work. A loud noise came from the audience. Go on, Alex. Don't be afraid. Hang loose for the first time in your life. We're all here, Melody shouted. What do you have to be afraid of? The crowd started chanting, Do it, Alex. Do it, Alex. And Ross raised his hand, and the audience became quiet. He held both of Alex's hands and pulled her close. He whispered as she followed his mouth. I can't hear you, Alex said. You don't have to hear me. Read my lips, he said quietly. And Ross whispered in a low tone, and she followed his words. Her eyes fixated on his mouth, and she closed her eyes as if she was asleep. Then he dropped her hand and leaned to whisper in her ear. Then Alex opened her eyes. I guess she wasn't a willing subject. It didn't work. Her will was too strong, Ross said to the audience with a small laugh. He took her hand and led her to her seat and said, Next. And 3 young women in their 20s dressed in pink Cinderella dresses, with tiaras on their heads, rushed the stage. It started out as innocent fun with a friend. But then all Alex's chance meetings began that way. And ended badly.